Today we're going to make the Pan American from the Rum Connoisseur, which was a small booklet presenting food and drink recipes using famous Ronrico rum. The copyright on this is from 1941, and that checks out as there were several other Ronrico Guides published starting in 1940 through the 1950s with similar recipes. The Ronrico Guides claim to offer a rare collection of superb drink recipes in which rum, the most versatile of all distilled spirits, is the chief ingredient. Now, there are other Pan-American cocktails like the Pan-American Clipper featured in the 1947 Gentleman's Companion, but those are different cocktails entirely. Sometimes cocktails just have the same name or similar names, and they're not even the same drink or even closely related. For this Pan-American, you'll need sugar, lime juice, pineapple juice, papaya syrup, drambuie, and 3 types of rum. Ronrico calls to use the gold label, white label, and red label, and since you can no longer find really any of those, I thought I would replace them using the descriptors from the Ronrico Guides. The gold label is 86 proof and has a delicate bouquet, so I'm going to use Bacardi 8 for that, just because. The white label is 86 proof and most delicate and light. I'm using Hamilton White Stash for that because it's a little bit, higher proof, and it's also just delicious. The red label is 90 proof and heavy, rich, and pungent. Now, historically, that would have been a rum from Puerto Rico, but as far as what I have, there's really nothing that's heavy, rich, that's from Puerto Rico. And the heaviest and richest of all the rums I have is Dr. Bird. So I'm going to use Dr. Bird Pineapple to up and intensify that pineapple flavor. Ronrico Guides call for very specific ways to mix drinks and specific ice to use. They even call out which brand and manufacturer of ice chipper you should use. This drink calls to Waring mix with 3 ounces of ice, and that means blender style, but also not a slushy style drink, which is why only using 3 ounces of ice would work. And then the drink is called to be served on crushed ice. But instead of doing that, instead of using a pineapple chunk, which the recipe calls for, I'm just gonna use pineapple juice, and I'm gonna use a drink mixer. It's a little bit easier than getting the blender out, but you could also shake this as well following this recipe. So let's build this in our drink mixer tin, starting with 1 teaspoon of bar sugar, and instead I'm gonna use 1.5 teaspoons of powdered bar sugar, 1/2 ounce of lime juice, 1/2 ounce of pineapple juice, 1 teaspoon of papaya syrup, a dash of drambuie, so I'm just going to use 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce of Ronrico Red Label, swapping in Dr. Bird here, 1/2 ounce of Ronrico White Label, swapping in Hamilton White Stash, and then 1 ounce of Ronrico Gold, and I'm using Bacardi 8 instead. Ronrico says to decorate with a slice of orange and a green cherry, so I'm just going to use some orange and a red cherry and a slice of pineapple. All right, so let's try the Pan American from the Ronrico Guides. I have a suspicion, I didn't check, but I have a suspicion that this drink does not exist on YouTube, and I'm sure it probably doesn't exist on the internet. It's probably the first time this recipe has made its way outside of an old Ronrico guide. But I'll check that, and if it is out there, then I'll just cut this part. All right, so I knew this was gonna happen the second I decided to put Dr. Bird in there, but it has that pungency in just 1/2 ounce quantity that only Dr. Bird can really bring to party, or other like very high ester Jamaican rums. My expectations were low because of the papaya syrup. If you're wondering, how do you make papaya syrup? Well, I took a papaya, I juiced it, and then I added sugar to make it 50 bricks. So like a simple syrup level of sweetness. And I will tell you that of all the tropical fruits, pineapple, guava, passion fruit, banana. My least favorite is papaya. I don't know why, it has like a little bit of a like squash taste to it. Now the one I used might not have been ripe, but I added a lot of sugar to it to make a syrup. I don't have a good substitution because I think almost all of you, if you want to try this, you're not going to be using papaya syrup. I think passion fruit is too strong of a flavor. But since we're only using a teaspoon, I would just say use something else that has sweetness. What's odd about this cocktail so far, it's actually really good. There's nothing in here that is too sort of bold, too flavorful, that like, it's not too sweet. It's not too much fruit syrup or fruit juices in here. And the drambuie, I don't know. I gotta have to sip on this longer to really be able to figure out if I can tell that 1/4 ounce drambuie is in there. Now, if you see a dash, you're like, hey, a 1/4 ounce is not a dash. Trader Vic said a 1/4 ounce is a dash. I'm just going with that for now. It's not like the drambuie is ruining this cocktail. It's barely there. The rums we use here are probably gonna be a lot more flavorful than those old Ronrico rums from the 1940s and 50s. You can still find yourself the huge bottles of Ronrico from Total Wine, but I don't think it's anything like what Ronrico used to be, and it's probably just the label slapped on something. But I don't want to say this is the best cocktail I've ever had, but for me, expecting to take this old recipe and find something that doesn't work for what I'm looking for, it's actually really good. And if you have a papaya syrup that you can find, maybe try it, or just another tropical fruit syrup. It is a good cocktail. From the old Ronrico Guides, I have several of those guides now that I want to be using more here on the channel because they're really cool to see those old recipes from the 1930s and 40s. So that's it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like below. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to support this channel more, check out the Patreon page if you haven't already. And otherwise, see you on the next one.